So as we get started, just want to see a raise of hands. Who here has never foraged for mushrooms or plants in their life? Awesome. Who here has foraged once or twice for mushrooms and plants? Who here thinks that they are a intermediate forager? Somebody who's got some pretty good experience? Okay, cool. And who here's like an expert forager and is like taking notes and like gonna call me out if I say something weird? All right, we got three. Yeah, Brandon, there we go. Cool. Who here has ever found sacred mushrooms growing in anywhere? Maybe in the cow patties, maybe elsewhere. Okay, cool. Awesome. You think you have? Cool. Let's see, what else? Who here is really scared about foraging because they don't want to kill themselves? Okay. All the other people aren't scared. So, oh, yeah, we got someone. You're scared? All right, Mariko's scared. We got some scared people. Okay, cool. Let's see. Who here has ever used sacred mushrooms? They don't have to be foraged, but who here has ever used sacred mushrooms? Now, raise your hand if this is part of a spiritual experience for you, that you connected to a deeper power, maybe the divine, maybe something that really got you excited to be alive. So I see a lot of spiritual people in the audience, and, to me, it doesn't necessarily matter what reason brings you to mushrooms, though because we're in the Bible Belt, as I'll explain, it allows me to feel legally protected to practice this and to share this with you as part of my sincerely held religious belief. So until Georgia drug laws get out of like the 1960s, this is one of the safest ways to practice your spiritual practice and religion. So before I talk about me, I just want to thank the ancestors that came before me and those that have the knowledge to share this with me so that I did not kill myself 13 years ago finding random mushrooms. And I just want to say that there are really amazing people in the Atlanta community, definitely people here today that are not me, that have led to my journey to feel safe foraging sacred mushrooms in Atlanta. And I'm not going to specifically signal out people, but there are people who are really making sure that this education is accessible to everybody. So you can even Google online, especially the website Shroomery, if anyone's ever heard of shroomery.org. And you can see people really discussing like how to forage these mushrooms, what the locations look like, and how to do this safely. So I get a lot of that education online from Reddit, from Shroomery, from Facebook, and from people in the community that have decided that this is important to share. So, a lot of the times they say, like, don't share your spots, don't tell anybody where your mushrooms are, and I understand that, and I have practiced that in some times. And I've also seen how when nobody forages, sometimes our favorite spots get bulldozed, or our favorite chicken of the woods tree gets shipped out of the park, and we could have had 20 years of mushrooms there if people really knew and cared. So I kind of think that the more people that care about these mushrooms, the more people that understand where and why they grow, that's actually good for me and good for all of you as well. So I'm not going to tell you exactly where they are because then it wouldn't be very fun. But sometimes we do go out together as part of our church and really show people where these mushrooms grow, why they grow, and to do that in a legal manner. So just wanted to thank people here today, people that are not here with us now that have really led to this knowledge, and it's something that any of you can access. We had Emory talk, and they mentioned how really expensive this can be. And this is like how really free this can be to the point where you don't have to pay a single dollar. So I think that foraging really does democratize access to these mushrooms, and I've found them in almost every single park in Atlanta. So, and to my knowledge, they were not planted there as well. So, yeah. Let's see. So I've been foraging, let me just take this. Actually, for 13 years, I'm born and raised in Atlanta, and about 13 years ago, I tried to find some sacred mushrooms and got robbed. And it was a calm robbing, like they didn't come back with my money, and I just sat in a parking lot for 2 hours. But at that point, I heard a friend say, like these just kind of grow out in the woods, and I had no idea what to do and what was going on. In Sandy Springs, I went into the woods and I saw chanterelles and I saw other mushrooms, and I started to realize the beauty of, every mushroom, really. I had no idea what I was doing. I did not know how to find sacred mushrooms, but I encountered all of the other mushrooms that really got me into foraging. So as a result of that misfortune, it really got me interested in learning more about the plants and the mushrooms, and I still learn something new each day. So I don't call myself an expert, but I will say that I've tried over 100 species of mushrooms native to Georgia and over 100 species of plants, and I really like to try new things and to have a diverse gut microbiome. So do it safely, and I'll teach you how to do that safely, but it's something that's been enjoyable. And I got into this because it was like a free hobby, like besides maybe biking there or walking, you can literally do this for free just walking out of your house. And you probably don't have to go too far either, so that's pretty awesome. Oh. Okay. Did you click it, or did it work? Oh. Okay, now it works. Yes. So, what makes a sacred mushroom sacred? Well, to me, all mushrooms and all plants are sacred. We created an organization called Whole and not Mushroom Church because I think that really every plant and every mushroom can really help us connect with the divine. And as I take a foraging tour later on, we're going to pass by sassafras plant, which gave us root beer, gave us MDMA, gives us gumbo filet. And so, each plant and each mushroom really has something unique to teach us. However, we know that if we all sat here and ate 5 grams of portobello mushrooms, we're probably not going to see God directly in that way. And for me, my personal philosophy is that each plant and each mushroom tunes us into a different deity, to a different entity. And mushrooms, sacred mushrooms, I've foraged different species of psychedelic mushrooms, and I think each have a different essence and something different to teach us. So anyways, entheogens, that word has been brought up a lot, and it means to help you feel God within you. And you could do that on a button mushroom, potentially. And there's another spot here in Piedmont Park that has the best tasting button mushroom I've ever had, growing out of the grass. Dogs probably peed on it, I don't know. But it was amazing, and it was a sacred experience as well. But we know that there's a gradient here. So psychedelic, that means mind manifesting, and entheogen, that really means to feel God within you, and usually related to psychedelic substances. So a little bit about the laws. It's extremely ironic, but the Bible Belt is one of the safest places to practice your religion as it pertains to entheogenic plants and mushrooms. And we know Oregon decriminalized drugs, right? Well, they're actually recriminalizing them and mushrooms back to illegal. So we actually have better laws than Oregon for this, and I can explain a little later. But the state constitution says that each person has the natural and inalienable right to worship God, each according to the dictates of that person's own conscience. And no human authority should, in any case, control or interfere with such right of conscience. Now, it shouldn't justify practices inconsistent with the peace and safety of the state or licentiousness. So this basically means, no, you can't take mushrooms, get in your car, and crash into 5 people. There is a spectrum here of what you can do, but if you use mushrooms or cannabis or cactus or ayahuasca in the privacy of your own home, and you're not giving it to the non-religious public, then it is, in my mind, legally defensible and supportive, and we will defend anybody in our congregation that has any legal problems. And they're getting ready to potentially pass the RFRA, which is the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act. I don't know if people have heard about that. It's gotten a lot of press. One of the negatives is that it can allow people to say, I don't want to serve you if I don't like you. which is definitely frustrating, especially being in Georgia and not having anti-discrimination laws. And the yin to that yang is that if you are caught with your sacrament, it will be extremely hard for the government to prove, as long as you're a member of a church or have some evidence, that you are a threat and that you are breaking the law. So in one instance, it will allow private employers to discriminate in ways that maybe they haven't legally done that. And on the other instance, we could potentially end the drug war in Georgia. So I personally think it's a great thing. I would like to provide safe support for those that feel discriminated from other institutions. Personally, if somebody doesn't like me, I don't want to give them my money, you know? But anyways, that is a complicated law. But just to say that if that law passes, it will be extremely supported in a religious sense to use these mushrooms in the entire state of Georgia. So Atlanta, I know they're pretty cool. As soon as you go down south or you go to up north to a different city, those mushrooms could be a 15-year felony if they're not used for religious purposes. So for me, in order to be safe and protected, I'm only able to serve people that do this as a religious practice until those laws change, which I don't think they're going to change anytime soon, sadly. So our story is that we're a 501c3 faith-based organization, and for us, we combine different elements of Eastern and Western religion, Buddhism, Taoism, Druidry, which, by the way, St. Patrick's Day, St. Patrick, his goal was to kill all the Druids and eradicate all of the pagans and people like us. Glad he failed. So we can wear green to celebrate, that he failed and he didn't kill everybody. Though he killed a lot of people, don't get me wrong. So it's really not the best holiday, sadly, but we're still here. So yeah, there's a lot of religions, and one of the oldest religions so this is Europe, Africa, Iran, India, East Asia, Oceanic, New Guinea, America. And everything we have in common is animism. These oldest religions that say, is that tree breathing? Right? Is that tree talking to me? Is that rock alive? If you all have taken mushrooms, you've probably asked yourself these questions, and all of our ancestors did too. And some of the mushrooms that we'll talk about today have been around for 10 million years. So I know we only have evidence of 10,000, but if you find these mushrooms and you begin to talk to the tree and talk to the essence of these animals, the animism says that there's a spirit within all living beings. And so that's really deeply connected to my spiritual practice, and everyone in this room is connected. Our ancestors all had this idea, and it really comes from foraging. Because when you forage plants and you forage mushrooms, you realize, if I eat that plant, I could die, right? If I eat the wrong mushroom, I could die. How do I know if this is edible or not? I'm not going to take out my phone, whip out AI, take a photo, and iNaturalist is going to tell me what to eat, which we can do now. Our ancestors potentially had to use, like in the rainforest, they used ayahuasca as a way to ask and sit with other plants and see, how can we use this plant? Will it kill me? Will it be medicine? Will it be food? That's what their dietas were. So these plants have been used to help us understand what we can eat, what we can use as medicine, and how to work with these plants. So I really recommend, if you're interested in using these plants and you have some sort of spiritual connection, that you connect with a religion that feels good for you. And if you try to make a new religion, be careful, because this guy Myers was caught with a bunch of marijuana, and he said, I've got the Church of Marijuana, here's my book, and the court basically said, here's 14 reasons why we're going to put you in jail. And it's complicated. So if you're part of an existing religion, it doesn't have to even say anything about mushrooms for you to be legally protected. So you can join our church, or what we call a synagogue, or you can join any religious organization and have some protection there. So, entheogenic mushrooms of Georgia, we have a few different genuses. So genus is, species like Psilocybe cubensis. Everyone heard of Psilocybe cubensis? Cubensis means it was found in Cuba. Did anyone know that? That's kind of weird, right? Yeah. Maybe it wasn't found in Cuba, though. Who knows? Maybe it wasn't from there. And golden teachers, I've heard, potentially came from Georgia. So that's kind of interesting. In Osaibi, I had a dream about finding one of these, but they're pretty rare. Alan Rockefeller, who studies psychedelic mushrooms, found one that under the microscope it looked like stars. Beautiful. Panaeolus, the pans are often grow in grass or in dung. So Pan sinensis, those are the blue meanies, I guess you'd call them. Still haven't found them. If anyone's got a farm here, happy to take a walk. And Pluteus americanus. So Pluteus are the deer mushrooms that you'll see in the wood chips. Somebody in the back here asked me if these were rare. They're not super rare, but Pluteus americanus is. And I have a friend who's actually in town now that has found some of these in Florida, the blue-winged Pluteus mushrooms. So never tried them myself, but they probably grow in South Georgia. Then there's these psilocybes. So cubensis grows on dung, but then there's carolensis or Wiley. And we'll talk more about these. Carolypes, Ovoidiocystidiata, and Tampanensis or Atlantis. So if anyone ever got mushrooms in Netherlands legally, those truffles, those are Psilocybe tampanensis or Atlantis, which were found initially in Atlanta and Tampa. Kind of funny that all these mushrooms started up right around here. So I feel like it's important to tell you about this potentially deadly look-alike, especially as you go into the woods and put something into your mouth immediately because you didn't listen to anything I said. You just like, Josh told me, it looks like this, I'm going to eat it and have a good time. Well, liver transplant is $800,000, I think. So you want to be careful. And Galerina is in this family, Hymenogastraceae, which I probably pronounced incorrectly. And it's the same family as psilocybe mushrooms. So it's the same family. They can look similar, and you want to know the differences. So Galerina often grows on extremely decayed wood, and it doesn't tend to grow in many clusters. Usually they kind of grow one by one. But if you just look at this mushroom by itself, it can look very close to psilocybe mushroom, and I have seen they do grow at the same time. So you want to know the differences. And I have a bunch of pictures. So about 10 mushrooms can kill a child. So it's not, there's not a lot of death from Galerina, mostly because you actually have to eat a decent amount. Wouldn't recommend it. I have chewed it up and spit it out and had some psychosomatic experiences, but it won't harm you or anything like that. Let's see, we got some more pictures though. So it contains the deadly amatoxins that are in death cap. And it's a pretty terrible death from what I hear. It takes about 6 days to kill you. So you really do want to be careful. And it does have this rusty ring around it. And it does have brown spores that come off of it. And again, I find it on super decayed wood. Here's some more photos of it. And it's all over North America. Often they'll call them little brown mushrooms. So if we're talking about the easiest mushrooms to identify, those are chanterelles, those are oyster mushrooms, maybe morels. Once we get into these psychedelic mushrooms that I'm going to talk about today, it gets a little more complicated, and you do really want to make sure you know what you have. Luckily, some of them bruise blue, others you can use a UV light and they glow. Beautiful. The Galerina don't glow by UV, so that's pretty neat to know. But you do want to be careful. I have found these in Morningside. So again, one thing to note, all of these gills are pretty straight. They have, they do bruise black as opposed to blue, okay? And they grow on super decayed logs in the winter. But they can, from above, look very similar to psilocybe mushrooms. So I just want you to make sure. So we'll start with this one. It grows in Piedmont Park. It grows in many Atlanta parks, and nobody planted them. It grows on wood chips. And, at one point, it really cured my depression, and I didn't even have to take them. And here's how it happened. Piedmont Park, there was this beautiful mulberry tree that we loved to eat from, just delicious fruit. But the problem was there was too much food, and it was getting on the tennis courts. And you can't have food on tennis courts, right? So you got to chop down the 30-year-old fruit tree. Yeah. So foragers, right? Are we going to chop down fruit trees? No. So the people destroying the parks are not the foragers picking a flower. It's people just chopping down 30-year-old mulberry trees. Well, they piled up a bunch of mulch from that, I assume, that mulberry tree not too far away. And one day I'm biking, kind of sad with how they manage the parks, and I see a 2-pound cluster of Gymnopolis luteifolius like glowing in the sun. And it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. And at that point, my depression went away. And then I took them, and they were really harsh on me. They're like, why'd you let them cut down the trees? Like, this just happens to me. But for whatever reason, they let me know that Atlanta parks, how they're managing the parks, not a great way to do it. So I tell them, if Atlanta doesn't want to grow the psychedelic mushrooms, then just stop cutting down trees and stop mulching them, and they won't grow. But I doubt they're going to do that. So currently, I think Atlanta City Parks is the #1 mushroom grower. And we'll see some more photos. So back to the religious aspects, I was curious about which religions use these entheogenic mushrooms, and I came across Taoism. Wikipedia, I don't know who writes it, but they've got some great stories. Don't know how many of them are true, but I like to trust it. And who here has heard of reishi mushrooms? Lingzhi, as my friend from North China says. Well, how long do you think they've been using reishi mushrooms for? Like, pretty long time? This is a picture, apparently, of a Lingzhi, which the interesting thing is, they said that it had many different colors, which reishis can be many different colors, right? It can be yellow, it can be purple, it can be red. But they also said that if you take enough of them, you'll see God. So has anyone taken enough reishi to see God? No. Well, we can keep trying. But I'm not so sure that they were talking about reishi when they were talking about this mushroom of immortality. Instead, this looks like gills. And you'll know that reishi has pores. And this guy's got a really big mushroom. And here you'll see the different ways they draw mushrooms, which, by the way, in the West, if I say draw a mushroom, you'll just draw the mushroom. In the East, you say draw a mushroom, they draw the background. This one's got mountains. This one's got a little forest. This one's got hands, hanging on the top of its head right there. I love these drawings from Taoist books of, macrofungi. But really, it turns out that there's a Gymnopolis or Gymnopilus mushroom that grows in southeast China that does allow you to see God and rainbow beings from firsthand experience. And it grows there, and it most likely Lingzhi was referring to sacred Gymnopilus mushrooms, which, if you learn about geography, the Southeast Asia is extremely similar to Southeast US. We have the same climate, a lot of the same trees, and a lot of the same mushrooms. So to me, Gymnopilus is a very spiritual mushroom, and I'll show some awesome photos of it. This is in Buckhead, just hanging out side of the road. And, basically every mulch pile I go to, you'll probably start seeing this in the summer. And one thing that I love is that we have 2 primary psilocybin-containing mushrooms that I really enjoy. And one of them's growing right now. And as it gets over 85 degrees, that one stops growing. And then Gymnopilus starts growing. And then as it gets colder, Gymnopilus stops growing, and the ovoids start growing. And except for mid-January to mid-February, there's something growing as long as it's raining. And as long as we keep cutting down trees. So good news for us to experience mushrooms for free. Look at this one. This one's pretty beautiful, huh? It's in Druid Hills. And I actually found this on the same day as I found ovoids, and it was a really awesome day, and this looked like it was rainbow. And then I proceeded to take them, close my eyes, and see rainbow beings. So I don't know, maybe that's just me. I don't want to project onto your experience, but pretty amazing. And you can see how it's just in the mulch, this mycelium here kind of growing. And so the experiences, okay, so dosing. This is one of the most variable mushrooms I've ever heard of. I've heard of somebody taking 30 grams dried and feeling nothing. Absolutely nothing. Alan Rockefeller talks and says, I took 9 grams dried, I should have taken 15. Okay. Well, I thought that was true for a second until I tried some from nearby. And let's see, I had about 8 grams. I thought, it's going to be a light experience. No, it was a heroic dose. It was probably closer to 5 grams of cubensis. And it was raining rainbows. I had to close my eyes, and it was kind of like an ayahuasca experience, actually, like a very deep, really empathetic experience. I had the bot from WALL-E, that white robot, just tell me to meditate and then fly away. So this is just to say that some people say it's about 3/4 as potent as cubensis. That's probably a good rule of thumb. But I will say, when they're purple, that's when they're the most potent. And I believe that after they spore and they're older, that could be when they're not as strong. Because I have had 155 grams fresh, which should be 15 dried, and barely felt much of anything. So each patch is different. If you're going to be using gymnopilus mushrooms for your religious practice, start slow and start low. And really, I'd say, let's see if this is true or not, 2 grams dried, see if you feel something in that. Make a tea. It would be a very light experience. But just know, even though Alan Rockefeller said he took 9, he would take 15, 8.5 could be an extremely intense experience that you probably won't have to take them for another 5 or 6 months because you're feeling pretty connected to the divine at that point. So yeah, level 4, so 8.5. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that number, but I have had people that have had experiences and barely felt them. And I will say that Gymnopilus luteofolius is now they think a group, and it could be that there are different species in them. And I have found some that Alan Rockefeller told me to ship off and get sequenced. That was 5 months ago. I haven't heard anything back, but it's possible that there are different species here. Another good thing about Gymnopilus is that if you get a UV light, they glow bright yellow or green, and the deadly Galerina does not reflect under light. Also, in Atlanta, Gymnopilus only grow in the summer, and the deadly Galerina only grow in the winter. So there's a video of Paul Stamets saying, never eat Gymnopilus mushrooms because you could confuse them with Galerina, which is probably true up in the Pacific Northwest. But here in Atlanta, different growing seasons, different timing, and $10 blacklight can, if someone's like, hey, I foraged these. I would not necessarily just trust a random person to do that. But there are ways to make sure, even when it's a dried specimen. And just to kind of give you an example, he doesn't go into Gymnopilus, I think, on this one, but this is the potency of psilocybin mushrooms. And the next mushroom I'm going to talk about is Psilocybe ovoidiocystidiata. You got a question? Yeah. Yeah, it'll glow yellow on a black light if it's fresh or dried. And another thing too, Gymnopilus means the same thing as psilocybe. Gymno means bald, pilus or pileus means cap. Except these ones have hair on them. So many Gymnopilus are bald capped, but this guy that grows here got hair on it. So, and psilocybe also means bald head. So it gets complicated, y'all. It gets pretty complicated. Don't worry about it. Just go slow. But so ovoids here are potentially twice as potent as some of these other mushrooms like cubensis, I think, as well as is more on the this one here. Yeah, cubensis is 1 to 5 milligrams per gram. To put that into perspective, Johns Hopkins uses 20 to 30 milligrams for their research. So that's kind of 2 to 3 grams of cubensis. However, ovoids are about potentially 2 to 5 times more potent than cubensis, just depending on how they're measured and stuff like that. So So the ovoids that are growing right now, Psilocybe ovoidiocystidiata, it's a mouthful, isn't it? Yeah, it's a lot. Same family as the deadly mushroom, but they can be extremely potent. And one of the key defining features is these wavy gills right here in the center. We call those crowded gills. So they are, basically all over in the mulch, and they have a really peppery smell. Like once you smell them, it's extremely, extremely strong. And even when they're not growing, you can actually just, if you see white mulch, just give it a smell. Does it smell peppery or does it smell like peanuts? It smells like peanuts. It might be Agrocybe, which is also potentially edible. I haven't eaten it myself. So ovoidiocystidiata, all that means is they put it under a microscope. The cystidia, we don't even know what it does. It may hold the moisture in the mushroom. It looks like an egg, an ovo. So under a microscope, if y'all have your microscopes, I know you all do, put it under there and you'll see an egg, right? So that's why it's got that complicated name. And they think that maybe they started in the Ohio River Valley, and they're kind of on the whole southeast and the east coast. Somebody brought them in mulch all the way to the west coast, and now they're all over Washington and Oregon, I believe. And recently they sequenced the DNA and found that they may even grow in Thailand and China as well. So talk about having the same kind of species. So you can Google it, but they do have this purple, brownish spore print. They grow on wood, and it often has a ring, but doesn't always have a ring. But the main thing here is that they do generally bruise pretty blue, and the deadly mushrooms will bruise brown, but like this is a very clear bluing on the mushroom. So that's another key defining feature. Another one is the cap is convex or umbonate. So umbonate's kind of like an umbrella, or it's got like a nipple on it. They will all have a little nipple on them generally. So you can see it here, you can see it there. You can see it, this kind of the top here. And so these are some from the wild. These are some of my favorite photos that I've taken myself. And they really do like when there's more moisture hanging out, when there's some plants that can hold the water in. They'll kind of grow longer, even after the rains. But again, you're getting to see more of this wavy gill, and the outside does turn a nice deep blue. You can even see the blue here kind of taking over the mushroom itself. Again, here's another umbonate structure and more waves. But there's not always this ring here on the stem. But again, they grow around this creeping Charlie, and they like to pop up in the spring, right after it's done being freezing. And then once it gets above 85, 90 degrees, they'll kind of wither away and stop producing until the fall. So experiences on ovoids. Anyone ever tried any of these mushrooms? We got a few people here. Maybe more next year if I ask the same question. So I hear seeing blue people is a common thread on this. I've seen a blue woman. She convinced me to sell my car a few years ago. It was a great 3 years. But then I had to buy a new car so we could go to the mountains and, help heal the earth as well. And a lot of different experiences. Recently, we hosted a ceremony, and a lot of people had the experience, myself included, of tubes. Somebody described it as the screensaver on those windows when we were like maybe 20 years ago, like those like tubes everywhere. To me, it looked like vines, more like maybe insects or plants. So it's a very, I'd say, a natural experience. On low doses, maybe around 0.6 to 1 gram, it's more like, I've heard somebody describe it as ecstasy coming out of the ground, which we may find a plant that actually is where ecstasy comes out of the ground today. But on higher doses, it can be more of your grandmother who's like giving you some hard advice and, like just telling you what you need to hear, but maybe you didn't want to hear it. So there's a mixed bag of experiences. Usually it helps us men cry a little bit. find our emotions and really get in tune. Yeah, you see some head nods, like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it really helps us get deeper into the experience. Another one, shout out to, again, a lot of these mushrooms friends and community members have really helped introduce me to these experiences, so it's really a pleasure to be able to share this knowledge with you. And when friends show me their spots, I do not show other people the spots that friends show me. So just good etiquette, if someone brings you to that area, it's generally wise to use what you've learned, and it's probably growing in your backyard and you just didn't know. But the last one here, it's really an interesting story. At one point, we thought that this was a mushroom that only grew in Georgia and nowhere else. So they called them Wiley eyes, after Andrew Weil. But then they found out that they actually are the same mushrooms that are growing in Mexico, that the Mazatecs take for their religious practices, and they call them derumbes, which is the landslide mushroom. And it's pretty beautiful that all these mushrooms have a similar theme. They take destruction, whether man-made or natural, and turn it into life. And in this instance, these mushrooms are the first thing that can grow after a landslide, and then plants can grow off after that. So these are psilocybe caerulescens, and they grow out of clay. And they often grow near sweet gum and pine, which are, sweet gum is a tree that is a pioneer species, so usually comes after land that has been eroded, destroyed. And I really dislike looking for these. A friend had mentioned, have you tried looking in parking lots? Or how about people's front yards in, Cobb or Marietta, No, I have not tried looking in parking lots for mushrooms, and I don't know that I will. But housing developments that are 2 to 3 to 4 years old seem to have a lot of these mushrooms coming out of people's front yards. Now, those mushrooms are probably for those people and the developers to take. And I'm not saying those, my parents are engineers and help, with this process, but some people really need to take some mushrooms. And maybe these mushrooms are for the development team to did we need to clear cut all that land, or could we have left some things? But yeah, sometimes I get the feeling that these mushrooms really have a message that isn't directly for me. So, most of us that forage these are I have mushrooms coming out of my ears. I don't need all of these, let's get them into the hands of somebody who really, really needs them. But another hypothesis is that we know that there's been trade from Central America up into the Etowah Mounds and into West Georgia. And these mushrooms are concentrated near the Etowah Mounds. And it's possible that these spores came up from Mexico and Central America and have kind of naturalized here. No one knows, but I kind of like to think that that's the case. And these are not as potent as cubensis or as ovoids, so they're a little bit less potent. And I haven't had too many deep experiences with these. This is the time of year where it's 99 to 100 degrees. And the mosquitoes, went with a few friends, and we had to run from the mosquitoes because this grows in clay soils, which hold on to water. So if you're getting attacked by a swarm of mosquitoes in a place that looks miserable, you're on the right path, okay? Yeah. So they say, no mud, no lotus, no poop, it's kind of the same thing. They just grow in a place where, I don't know, I'm usually looking for chanterelles or something out there. But I have some friends that have some more experiences, and if you take enough, it's very similar and comparable to the psilocybe experiences from what I hear. So I want to leave you all with this before I ask any questions, is that a lot of this work for me as a forager has culminated in the idea that we really need to care for the forest, right? I don't know, has anyone ever gotten we need to help the environment vibe from the mushrooms? Yeah, round of applause. Yeah, so pretty sure most of you got that message. If you haven't, take a few more mushrooms and you probably will. And this led me to the idea of, well, how can I connect with land that doesn't have to constantly be destroyed or cut down? And I personally don't plan to have children of my own, but I want to leave a legacy that's a park that we can all forage in, have food, grow medicinal and native plants, and really have Garden of Eden situation, in real life. And one of the ways that I came to create this experience, one of the ideas that I had, is to create a natural burial cemetery where we can literally become the forest, okay? And by doing that, by being buried in this land, it will be very hard for people to develop the land. So we are able to be there, to have mushrooms. Maybe you want some sacred mushrooms growing on top of you after you pass. Can't happen in any cemetery that I know of, but in ours, if it's your religious practice and it's in our church cemetery, that's something that I think will be allowed. And so we're starting, this is not now through the church, we're starting with land in northwest Georgia. I'm partnering with an existing forest called Just Love Forest. There's 716 acres of beautiful land. And our goal is to have the top of the mountain a place where we start to really come in contact with the land, find ways to allow people to become the forest, and then to buy land that's been clear cut and logged to be able to rehabilitate the land. And we want people that are part of this cemetery to be able to go there to plant native plants and native mushrooms, to be able to harvest, to be able to celebrate, do ceremonies there, work with our ancestors and connect. And so that's really one of my passions, is that by having these cemeteries, we can basically say this park will remain a park as long as our state governments decide not to build on cemeteries, which we hope is for hundreds and hundreds of years. And by purchasing a plot as well, part of the money does go to maintain that and to make sure that it does not need to be sold. So that's really what the mushrooms have taught me, is how can we really care for the land. And usually they're coming out of places that, my favorite one is the sewer systems, Chattahoochee. Don't jump in it for the next week because it's full of crap. And, these sewer systems, they have to keep digging them up. One of my favorite parks is closed, where I find tons of these, because the sewer blew up, I guess. And every time they have to dig it out and put it back on and mulch all the trees, mushrooms seem to love to grow right there. So every time, we're humans, we've created this environment that sometimes needs a little bit of, the trees like thinning and, so I used to only see cutting down trees as a negative thing, but I understand that there is a balance, that humans are part of this ecosystem, that we have used these plants and these mushrooms. Sometimes we're just not really paying attention, and other times it is more intentional. And I think the mushrooms have a lot to teach us, and as we forage them, as we go on this walk, you can see where mushrooms may grow. I'm not sure that they're going to be growing there right now. They may. But you'll get to understand, really what are they trying to teach us? When they're growing out of the cow poop, when they're growing out of the landslides, when they're growing in your mom's new 4-bedroom house in the front yard in the Bermuda grass. What are they trying to teach us? I don't know. I think that's for you all to decide. So as I leave you today, and we can talk about sharing experiences, I really want to just stress that we live in Georgia, a state that, as I was a marijuana activist in Athens, we helped decriminalize marijuana, and we arrested more people per capita than anywhere in the country, okay? And private prisons do not want mushroom laws, not like many people are getting arrested for mushrooms, but don't want marijuana laws, mushrooms, or sacred plants to be accessible to people at all. And I truly do believe that our state constitution protects your religious right to use mushrooms, to use plants, to connect with the plants in the forest, as long as you're not harming other people, right? As long as we're not hurting other people, I believe that it is a protected right that you have and that I have. So if you would like, you can join our Synagaia. One of the easiest ways to be protected is to apply to join. You'll have record that this is a religious practice for you. If that is the case, you need to be sincere. But also, things change. Sometimes we learn something new. We learn a new opportunity, a new way to connect. And so basically, if something does come up, they need to know that you didn't just make up as soon as you got arrested that this is your religious practice. And by being part of an existing organization, you have evidence to show this isn't just something you made up. It is truly your sincere belief that we need the plants, every mushroom, to connect with legally. And if they made ginger illegal or they made turmeric illegal, wouldn't you be pissed? Right? Yeah, I'd be pissed too. And it would still be our religion to use those as well. So I don't think I've got anything else. So what questions do you have? Let me do a time check real quick. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, you want to clap? Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, do a clap. Do a clap. So I guess I want to leave you with the banana test. If you're foraging something, you need to pass the banana test, okay? If I have a raspberry in my hand, maybe I have a banana in my hand. All right, I got a banana in my hand, and I say it's a raspberry, would I fool any of you here today? No, because you know what a banana looks like, right? But if I had a mushroom in my hand and I told you what it was, would you know what it was just as well as a banana? So you probably shouldn't eat it alone unless you're shaking your head yes. And that's how serious it is. And a lot of people are scared of mushrooms, but you're more likely to kill yourself with plants, potentially, or at least hurt yourself, because you can put mushrooms in your mouth and spit them out safely, but plants, poison ivy, don't want to do that. So just be careful. You know, foraging is something that can be done very safely, but if you're going to be alone, you're not going to ask anyone for help, you got a book in your hand, you want to pass the banana test. So what questions do y'all have? We'll take a few minutes for questions, and then we'll go on a little foraging walk. We're going to go kind of down. I'll show you the beautiful sassafras trees are in bloom. We'll try some sassafras leaves. We'll talk about how the U.S. government tried to criminalize the entire tree, and Mississippi tried to secede from the Union. That's fun. We'll try some flowers that taste really good, and then we'll see where mushrooms may or may not grow. We'll do a nice little walk. So I'll take a few questions. Yep. Mm-hmm. It's a good question. This was kind of my observation. Like, no one really came up with this until on a Facebook group I just tested it myself. Psilocybe sometimes glow purple, which is interesting, but purple could be like yeast. So I don't know if it's actually the mushroom glowing, but Gymnopilus, the laughing gyms they call them, or also the dancing mushrooms, which, by the way, if you're harvesting these, the Taoists said that the energy you have when you harvest these determines how the experience will be. So if you're dancing while you're picking it, then people are going to be dancing. And if you're angry while you're picking it, then people may be angry, I guess. But they can make you laugh. I would never use just one key characteristic to identify something. So Gymnopilus, do I have, let's see. Specifically, the gyms are going to be some of the hardest to identify, but the colors here, this bright red, usually the hairs on the top of this mushroom, I really like to see these hairs. The deadly Galerina do not have hairs like that on the top. And the gills, these ones specifically in Georgia, like Atlanta seems to be a hot spot for these. These are the golden gilled Gymnopilus. So the gills are very yellow, whereas the deadly Galerina, yeah, okay, look how yellow these gills are here. I mean, and oftentimes the stem is like purple with, it almost looks like veins, like vascular system. But the Galerina, on the other hand, there's no hairs on the top here. It looks more like the psilocybe mushrooms in my estimation. So make sure if you read the description of a mushroom, you want to know every word. And if you don't know the words, look them up. But the gills are more crowded, more wavy. They turn blue. The ovoids, just cut them in half and see if they oxidize and turn blue. These Galerina you can see how they get a little brown towards the bottom here. That's not blue, that's brown. So make sure you can see that as a difference. Good question. What other questions do y'all have? Mm-hmm. How often? So our synagogia, which is another word for church, it's confusing, but I wasn't raised Christian and church isn't my deal. But we gather weekly on Thursdays in Midtown, and we have a small group. We currently don't have, It's not true. We may have a church that we can meet at that's in Candler Park, but we haven't made it more to the public. So if you're interested, everyone got that link. You can join the Synagogue, which means you're basically sending in an application, and then we'll call and have a conversation with each one of you to see, like, what are your needs, how can we connect you with community, and here's the options that we have. So our goal is really holistic well-being. It's not, the mushrooms usually tell you to get your shit together, and then you're like, well, how do I do that? And you can come to us. We can have healthy food, healthy communication, healthy support, and tuning in with our needs. So we really try to create a holistic well-being approach to like complement the mushrooms, because you've got to integrate the work. And you're not going to want to just take mushrooms all the time, right? I mean, people who have done it, no. Take enough and you're not going to want to take them for a little while, but you still need community. You need friends, you need support, you need a practice. So yeah, we meet on Thursdays in Midtown currently. And my goal really is to have a place in the country with hundreds of acres that we can all forage, frolic, have ceremony in, have our own set of rules that's respectful and nonviolent and peaceful, but also, not necessarily what the government says you need to do and this is how you need to do it. So yeah, that's the hope, is that we have something in the city, we've got something in the country. Did someone else have a question? Yeah. Yeah, how did I get into this? Well, I said I got robbed, right? Well, yeah, oh yeah, you were late, yeah. So, I first took mushrooms and they told me, I say I went from conservative to communist in 6 hours, and now I'm somewhere in the middle. I mean, not directly there. But my mom always told me, you're going to need like a lot of money to do what you want to do. Like, you're just going to need like tons of cash, right? Just sacrifice your life and get a high-paying career. And I started to wonder, like, how would we survive without this money stuff? Like, how did that happen? And, well, food, that's kind of important, so that really got me into foraging, was like, how can I be self-sufficient without the need for money? And as somebody in high school and college, like, there's events, like certain events that we host that I would not be able to afford, but getting in the car, going to the mountains and finding some mushrooms was like super thrilling and exciting, and cost me like gas, and my use of Facebook. So really the fact that and once I started foraging, it really connected me with nature. I don't know if anyone can relate, but when you use cannabis and your parents aren't on board, you kind of got to go to the woods, right? And you're like, wow, the woods, man, that's pretty cool. Like, there's trees and bugs and birds and stuff. And so, it was a gateway experience for me into nature. And once I got there, I just wanted to continue to learn, like, what's that? What can I eat it? And how can I come into contact with these plants in a way that's respectful and supportive of them? And so I've developed into this idea of the honorable harvest, which, the goal is really to understand each mushroom and each plant, what they're trying to share with us and how we can support them, right? So the Native Americans, when settlers came, they didn't really understand why there was so many fruitful trees and why there was so much amazing food. Like, they thought it was this virgin forest, but it had been maintained and supported, and the trees that they wove baskets for were prayed over and watered and nourished. So that's where it's come from, well, how can I find sacred mushrooms, to how can I help this forest heal, and how can I create sustenance and nourishment? And I have a few degrees. I have a master's of public health and a master's of social work. And most people in those fields spend 40 hours a week behind a computer. You couldn't pay me enough money to do that, honestly. I feel terrible doing that. So really, I got into this line of work because I want to be outside in the woods. That's where I feel the best. I want to connect with people like you all that really, like, we're all like kids foraging, and we tell people not to do anything they don't want to do. Just do it with the joy of an adult foraging psychedelic mushrooms right off of the side of the road. That's a joyful experience right there. Yeah, 60-year-olds like, oh my God, they're getting on the ground and they're like, oh, this is amazing. It's extremely exciting, and hopefully we'll see that on the hike. So thanks for asking. What other questions do y'all have? Mm-hmm. Good question. That's a good question. So the question is, do I adhere to the forager's percentage rule? And so I think this is an important concept, the difference between plants and mushrooms. And we'll go when we harvest, or, a plant, right, is the living being, and if you take all of the leaves and all of the branches from that tree, you're going to significantly harm that tree. And generally it's suggested that you take no more than 1/3 of the leaves, branches, shoots, the actively living part. Generally fruit, for example, is meant to be spread around, and there's usually not a percentage this is how much fruit, especially fruit that comes from invasive plants. So there's a pretty deliciously invasive plant, the silverberries that are growing right now, and you can eat as many as you want of those and crush the seeds so they don't make any more trees. Mushrooms are fruit, and they want to be dispersed. The main thing is that when we walk with baskets, you can actually disperse those seeds, right? Or the spores, sorry. But because it's often illegal to forage, we put them in our backpack, myself included, and they don't often get their space. I wouldn't recommend doing this in public parks, but for your religious practice, if these mushrooms are growing out of mulch, the mycelium is growing on that mulch. You could take that mulch and put it in your other mulch pile and give it more food if it's kind of not getting enough where it's at. So there's ways to, if there's baby little mushrooms coming up, like leave the babies to continue to grow, right? If the government asks, like I'm removing a potentially controlled substance from the public, so like the non-religious people don't get a hold of them, obviously, because that would be bad and completely illegal. But generally with mushrooms, some mushrooms will continue to grow. So like the hen of the woods here in Atlanta, I have a tree and I took a little bit, and then I bike and I saw somebody else took a little bit, and then I come back and then I take a little more, and then that person came back and they took a little more. But then other mushrooms, like if it's just one mushroom and you cut it in half, it's just going to wither away and die. So I'd say, really, and this is what the Honorable Harvest says, know each mushroom and each plant. Some mushrooms, like shelf mushrooms, can grow for 5 to 10 years. Like some of these polypores that just like look like they have multiple rings. Whereas other ones come up for like 20 minutes, or like a day. So really just understanding, is leaving that going to make a difference? Or maybe I can even move it to another place, and that would be more beneficial for the mycelium. So you really want to know the plant, the mushroom, and if you're going to harvest from a plant, clean the area up, remove the invasives. It's one thing I do is like remove some of the English ivy and some plants that may be shading out the area. And just one of the areas where mushrooms grew, there were some plants that they didn't like, so they sprayed them all with glyphosate. And so really I'm like, just tell me, I will like remove the weeds so you don't do that, and you become a steward of that patch. Well, all right, who's ready to go for a little walk and find some plants? Awesome. Well, let's do it. We're going to head to the back and, follow me out.